The empty chair beside Grace had been there for 3 hours, and not a single person had come over. She wondered if she would make the same wish as every year, for someone, anyone, to sit down and stay. Late in the afternoon, the last sunlight slipped through the lace curtains of Harvest Moon Bakery, scattering soft golden streaks over the old tiled floor. The scent of waffles mingled with melting butter wrapped around the air, carrying the warmth of some tucked-away memory. The bakery sat at the corner of downtown Willow Creek, the kind of place where anyone passing by felt compelled to stop, as if time itself slowed here. Near the window, Grace Anderson sat still in her wheelchair. In front of her rested a simple white birthday cake, 23 candles standing in a neat row, their flames trembling in the pale light. Beside her, an empty chair, empty since early afternoon, was a tangible silence, saying what everyone could see. Today, she sat alone. No birthday song. No one was urging her to blow out the candles. Only Grace and the quiet, as though all sounds from outside had been held back behind the glass. The bell over the door chimed softly. A man stepped in tall, broad-shouldered, his coat carrying the faint scent of freshly cut pine. Following close behind was a brown-haired girl with bright eyes, clutching a small gift box clumsily wrapped in blue paper, chattering away as she walked. Ethan Mitchell was used to hearing his daughter talk without pause, but today he noticed that when Chloe suddenly stopped mid-sentence, her gaze fixed on the table by the window, she froze, then tugged at her father's hand and whispered, "Dad, she's sitting all by herself. Can we sit with her?" Ethan looked over. The woman Grace sat with her back straight, but her eyes seemed far away. The cake before her was still lit, the chair beside her still empty. An image that tugged at his heart. He had seen that look in the mirror on the anniversaries of Sarah's passing his wife, and he knew too well that feeling. Sitting next to something you've lost, or something that never had the chance to arrive. He bent down and asked quietly, "Do you want to start the conversation? Or should I?" Chloe thought for a moment, then decided firmly, "You start. I'll give her mom's present." Ethan approached the table, his steps slow, his voice warm and careful so as not to startle her. "Excuse me, would you mind if we sat here? My daughter would like to wish you a happy birthday." Grace looked up, her silver-gray eyes glinting with surprise, when her gaze met the gentle smile of the man and the little girl holding the gift. A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. How long had it been since someone asked to sit with her, not out of obligation, not because they were paid to, but simply to be there? Chloe didn't wait for an answer. She set a small cupcake in front of Grace, a star-shaped candle on top. "I'm Chloe. Today is my mom's birthday. She's in heaven now, but Dad says she can still see us celebrating. I want to give you this cake." Grace blinked. The way the little girl spoke of loss was as gentle as describing a cloud drifting across the sky. A truth both beautiful and piercing. Ethan pulled the empty chair closer, filling the space that had existed all afternoon. "No one should have to eat cake alone," he said. Taking a seat, the star-shaped candle flickered. Its light reflected in Grace's eyes. She realized she was smiling a real smile as Chloe sang "Happy Birthday," a little off-key but full of earnest warmth. And in that moment, Grace closed her eyes and made a wish so simple it could have melted into the air. That from now on, she would never have to sit across from an empty chair again. The star-shaped candle on the small cupcake faded out, leaving a thin wisp of smoke curling upward between the three of them. Grace hadn't yet realized what she had wished for when the story began to unfold. For Ethan Mitchell, today was not just a chance encounter. He had never forgotten Sarah's birthday, his wife's. Not because he counted the years since she passed, but because that day was also the day Sarah was born. Ever since Chloe was old enough to understand, father and daughter would make a single cupcake, light a small candle, and come to Harvest Moon Bakery, Sarah's favorite place to celebrate in heaven, as Chloe called it, not to add to the sadness, but to remember that love remained, even when the one you loved did not. Chloe, with her soft brown hair and bright eyes like her mother's, had always believed that memories and laughter could coexist with sorrow. The moment she stepped into the bakery, she noticed the unfamiliar woman sitting alone with a large cake and the empty chair beside her. Somehow, That look in Grace's eyes mirrored the one in her father's on the nights of her mother's birthday. Grace Anderson had thought she was accustomed to loneliness. The accident at 18 had taken away her ability to walk and had turned her father, William Anderson, a real estate tycoon, into a stranger. William had never abandoned her materially. The best doctors, the most expensive therapy, the most comfortable mansion. But everything was arranged with the cold precision of a project, rather than a journey a father and daughter would walk through together in pain. In recent years, Grace's birthdays had been reduced to a few terse messages and a bank transfer she never managed to spend. Every empty chair beside her on that day was a mirror reflecting the distance between them. Ethan was different. He didn't run from loss. In his small woodworking shop on the outskirts of town, the scent of oak and pine resin seeped into every strand of hair. Every stitch of his shirt, each table, each picture frame he crafted, was proof that from pieces once thought useless, something enduring and beautiful could still be made. That was how he raised Chloe. Chloe had inherited her mother's bright eyes and her father's gentle, perceptive heart. Perhaps because she had grown up with the absence of a mother, she could easily recognize someone else's empty chair. When she saw Grace, Chloe knew she had found another soul waiting for someone to sit down. Ethan quietly watched as Chloe sang "Happy Birthday." He saw Grace's shoulders tremble, whether from emotion or from trying to hold something in. He couldn't tell. When she opened her eyes, the candlelight had gone out, and a faint smile curved her lips. Ethan didn't know what she had wished for, but in that moment, he felt the distance between them had grown just a little shorter. The star-shaped candle on the little cupcake had just gone out, leaving a thin ring of smoke dissolving into the space between the three of them. Grace lowered her head slightly, taking a small bite as if it were a quiet ritual to honor the little girl's kindness. "Thank you, Chloe," she said, her voice a little unsteady. "Is it good?" Chloe asked, her wide eyes waiting for an answer that seemed important. Grace nodded. "It's delicious. Did you and your dad make it together?" "Yes. I picked the star candle because my mom loved looking at the stars," Chloe replied quickly, then climbed into the chair across from Grace. The empty chair beside Grace was empty no more. Ethan sat down next to his daughter, resting his elbow lightly on the table. "I'm Ethan, and this is Chloe, though. I guess you already know that." He smiled. "Today is Sarah's birthday, my wife, Chloe's mom. Every year on this day, we come here to remember her in the warmest way we can." His tone was gentle, like he was telling a fond memory rather than speaking of a loss. Grace listened, realizing their bond was woven not only from love, but from the courage to face pain together. At home, her father avoided anything that reminded him of her mother. Photos, belongings, even stories all vanished as if they had never existed. But here, in front of her, sat a man and his daughter who kept memories alive, letting them live alongside the present. The conversation began with simple things: favorite kinds of cake, the smell of morning coffee, rainy days in Willow Creek. Chloe spoke the most about the neighbor's cat, a new song she was learning at school, and the picture she was painting of her mom and a new friend she hadn't met yet. Ethan listened, occasionally slipping in a playful comment that made his daughter giggle. Grace felt as though she had stepped into another world, a place where empty chairs were filled naturally, without contracts, without scheduled care visits, simply through presence. "Do you come here often?" Ethan asked. "No, this is my first time in years. I used to come with my mom, but after she passed, I didn't come back." Ethan nodded, his eyes understanding. "Sometimes going back to an old place isn't easy, but I believe it still holds a piece of the person you love." Chloe propped her chin in her hands, tilting her head toward Grace. "Then, from now on, will you sit with me every year? Dad says no one should eat cake alone." Grace laughed. The simple words somehow touched the deepest part of her. "I think I'd like that." Outside the window, the afternoon light had softened. Ethan glanced at his watch, then looked back at Grace. "Next week, we're feeding ducks at Central Park. Chloe would be so happy if you came along." Grace hesitated. She wasn't used to being invited somewhere that wasn't tied to therapy or work. But when she met Chloe's expectant gaze, she heard herself say, "I'll try." Ethan smiled a smile without pressure. Only acknowledgement. They stood to leave. Chloe turned back and waved. Remember, Miss Grace, the empty chair today shouldn't be empty again. Grace remained at the table, looking at the chair that had been filled just minutes ago. It was empty again, but it felt different, as if it were waiting for something new, rather than reflecting loneliness. And for the first time in years, she wanted to come back. A week later, Grace arrived at Willow Creek Central Park right on time, just as she had promised. She came a little early, parking her wheelchair along the path by the lake, where the sunlight shimmered on the water's surface and the sound of ducks drifted across the breeze. It had been a long time since she'd left the house for a reason that had nothing to do with hospitals or work. From a distance, she saw Chloe running toward her, a bag of breadcrumbs swinging in her hand. "Miss Grace, you came." The girl's voice rang out in delight. Ethan followed behind, raising a hand in greeting. "I told Chloe you'd come, but I think she still had her doubts." They fed the ducks together, then walked along the lake. At first, the conversation stayed light. Chloe talked about an art project at school, and Ethan mentioned the wooden table he was building for a client. But slowly, Grace found herself sharing more about the long days in the hospital, about the moment she realized her legs would never stand again, and about the ache of watching friends drift away when she was no longer the same. Ethan didn't interrupt, nor did he offer hollow reassurances. He simply nodded, occasionally asking a short question, just enough to let her know she was being heard. Chloe, with the natural ease of a child, suddenly suggested, "Do you want to play 3 Happy Things? It's the game Dad and I play every night before bed." Grace chuckled. 3 happy things. Uh-huh. Each person says 3 things that made them happy that day. No matter how bad the day is, there's always at least one, Chloe explained. Grace was about to decline, but Chloe's expectant eyes changed her mind. "All right. 1. The weather's beautiful today. 2. Feeding the ducks with you two. And 3. She hesitated, the feeling of not having to sit alone. All 3 laughed. Ethan glanced at her, his expression not insistent, just quietly holding on to her words. In the weeks that followed, they met more often, sometimes at the park, sometimes at a small cafe downtown, and sometimes back at Harvest Moon Bakery. Each time, the empty chair beside Grace was filled by Chloe, by Ethan, or by both. One autumn afternoon, golden leaves piled thick outside the bakery door. Chloe was absorbed in coloring her new sketchbook, while Ethan and Grace talked. He spoke of Sarah not with the tone of someone in pain, but as if opening a gentle box of memories. She was a kindergarten teacher, believed every child was a universe. "Even our little apartment turned into a fairy tale forest when she picked up a paintbrush," he said, his eyes warm with remembrance. For the first time, Grace spoke in detail about the day of the accident. At first, her voice was even, like she was reading a report. The red light, the drunk driver, the sensation of tilting, then darkness. But when she reached the moment, she woke up to hear her father discussing treatment options with the doctor, as if it were a business deal. Her voice faltered. "He didn't touch my hand. He just asked about costs and treatment plans." That's when I knew I had become a project. Ethan was quiet for a few seconds before speaking slowly. "I think sometimes people step back, not because they don't love, but because they don't know how to love in the new reality." His words left Grace silent, not as a path to forgiveness, but like a sliver of light breaking through a thick wall. One rainy day, the 3 of them sheltered under the bakery's awning when Chloe announced, "From now on, this chair is Grace's friend's chair. See, only real friends get to sit here." Ethan laughed. "So, do I qualify?" "Yes, but you have to always bring cake," Chloe replied with certainty. Grace looked at the chair beside her. It was no longer a symbol of emptiness, but a promise to meet again, and somewhere deep inside, she realized she was looking forward to the next time, as if her life had stopped orbiting around what was lost and had begun to revolve around what was here. William Anderson had long considered himself someone who never overlooked anything concerning family. But his definition of family had changed years ago, until it seemed to consist of only himself. When the housekeeper at the mansion reported that Grace had been going out frequently and meeting a strange man with a little girl, He immediately ordered the security team to investigate. Just a few days later, a thick file lay on his walnut desk. Photographs of Ethan Mitchell, a carpenter, living in a rented house on the edge of town, earning just enough to get by. Other pictures showed him and Chloe with Grace at Harvest Moon Bakery, walking in the park, and talking by the duck pond. William flipped through each photo, his eyes as cold as steel. In his mind, the story had only one script: a working-class man approaching his daughter, who sat atop an inheritance for one reason alone: exploitation. That evening, he summoned Grace to his study, a room she had avoided since the accident. The air smelled of leather and polished wood, the walls lined with framed awards, a large screen flickering with real-time stock prices. Grace stopped at the doorway, the chill settling over her. "Come closer," William said, his eyes never leaving the screen. Grace rolled her wheelchair inside, waiting in silence. "I'm ordering you to end all contact with the man named Ethan Mitchell and that child. Immediately." Grace blinked. "Why?" "Because he's using you. A man like that wouldn't approach you unless it was for money." "A man like that, what does that mean?" Grace's voice dropped, edged with steel. William looked up, a poor carpenter, widowed, raising a child alone. He saw an opportunity and took it. The words cut like a blade. "And what do you think I am? A treasure to be stolen, or a commodity to be traded? I think you're a disabled young woman, vulnerable, and I will not let anyone take advantage of that weakness." Grace let out a dry, bitter laugh. "No. You won't let anyone get close because you can't bear to see me like this. You hide behind work, behind money, so you don't have to face it." William stood, his shadow stretching across the hardwood floor. "I'm protecting you." "No. You're imprisoning me," Grace replied. "Ethan and Chloe, they see me, not the wheelchair, not the bank account. Do you remember the last time you looked at me and didn't see a project?" A heavy silence hung between them. William's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. "If you keep seeing them, I will act. I can get him fired, bankrupt, even take his child away." Grace knew her father had the power to make those threats real. The image of Chloe laughing beside her at the bakery's table flashed through her mind, and her heart clenched. "You'd better understand," William said, turning back to the screen. The conversation ended like a business deal just closed. That night, Grace texted Ethan, each word like swallowing glass. "Ethan, I can't see you anymore. Please don't contact me. I'm sorry." Ethan read the message while locking up his workshop. He stared at the screen, reading it again and again, hoping the words would somehow change. But they didn't. Still the same short, cold sentences. Chloe found her father sitting motionless in the living room. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Miss Grace isn't going to see us anymore." The girl was quiet for a moment, then said firmly, "But she loves us." "I know. She smiles differently when she's with us." 3 days later, Ethan's workshop was silent. Everything he touched reminded him of a story he'd been meaning to tell Grace. Chloe stopped singing like she used to. The little house seemed darker. On the kitchen table, the chair for Grace, the Grace's friend's chair, Chloe had claimed at the bakery, sat empty again. Ethan looked at it and realized the emptiness wasn't just there. It was inside him. On the 4th day, when Chloe asked, "Dad, is Miss Grace not seeing us because we're not rich?" something in Ethan broke, not into anger but into resolve. "Get your coat," he said. "Where are we going?" "To Miss Grace's house." They drove to the Anderson estate gates. The guard stopped them. Ethan didn't argue. He just rested a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Chloe pressed her face to the gap in the gate and called out, "Miss Grace, I miss you. Don't let the chair be empty again." Inside, Grace heard the voice drifting through her window. She had promised herself she would protect them from her father. But now she realized that keeping them out was hurting them, too. She looked at the chair beside her desk, empty, and this time, it looked exactly like the one at the bakery, the day Ethan and Chloe had first come to fill it. This time, she decided she would not let it sit empty again. Chloe's voice still echoed in Grace's mind. Even after the father and daughter had disappeared beyond the iron gates, she sat by the window, her hands gripping the rims of her wheelchair. For the past 4 days, she had tried to convince herself she was protecting them. But now, That thought sounded more like an excuse. Chloe's eyes, clear, trusting, and full of hope, as if all it would take was for Grace to show up, and the empty chair in their world would be filled again. The room around her was tidy, luxurious, yet so silent she could hear the tick of the clock's second hand. No laughter, no voices, only emptiness with shape and sound. On her desk, the chair beside her sat empty once more, and Grace realized an empty chair will always be an empty chair until someone chooses to sit in it. She threw on a thin raincoat, avoiding the main elevator, which would take her past William's office, and instead headed for the service lift at the end of the hall. Each turn of her wheels felt like a heartbeat pounding louder. On the ground floor, Maria the cook, who had been with the Anderson family for over 20 years, spotted her. With just one glance, Maria understood. "Go," she whispered, holding the back door open. Some rains are worth getting soaked in when you know you're going to the right place. The cold air stung her face as Grace rolled into the courtyard. Rain poured hard, the sloped path slick, but she didn't stop. Each turn of the wheels carried her farther from her father's control and closer to where her heart wanted to be. She didn't go home. She headed straight for Harvest Moon Bakery. The rain quickly wore through her coat, clinging to her skin. Her hands ached, her shoulders burned, but her heart blazed hot. In her mind, she saw that first moment here, the empty chair beside her, then Chloe and Ethan filling it. When the bakery's wooden door swung open, the bell chimed softly, and warmth and the scent of fresh pastries rushed toward her. At the familiar table, Ethan and Chloe were sitting almost as if an invisible thread had pulled all three of them back together at the same moment. Chloe looked up first. Her eyes widened, then lit up. "Miss Grace," she cried, running to wrap her arms around her. Not caring about the soaked raincoat, "I knew you'd come back. I told Dad you would." Ethan stood, quickly taking off his coat to wrap around her shoulders. "You're freezing. What are you doing out in this weather?" Grace looked up, her voice trembling but certain. "Because I choose you. I choose Chloe. I choose us. My father can threaten all he wants, but I'm not living in that cage anymore." The door opened again. Heavy footsteps crossed the floor. William Anderson stood there, his expensive suit drenched, silver hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes like stones. "Grace, enough. Come home. Now." Before Grace could answer, Chloe stepped forward, small but steady. "You're Miss Grace's dad, but you make her cry. My dad was sad when my mom died, but he stayed. You ran away." The innocent words struck like a hammer against the ice in William's eyes. He blinked, looking at his daughter soaked, but with a gaze burning bright. For the first time in years, he truly saw her. Not the wheelchair, not a project to manage, but his daughter fighting to live as herself. "Dad," Grace said slowly, "when I woke up after the accident, I didn't need the best doctors or the most expensive equipment. I needed you. But you disappeared. I stopped being your daughter and became a problem to solve. Ethan and Chloe, they see me. They sat in the empty chair beside me. And from that day, I haven't eaten cake alone." The bakery fell quiet. Outside, the rain kept falling. But something here was beginning to thaw. William lowered his head. I didn't know what to do. When your mother died, I thought I could make up for it by doing more, earning more. But when you were hurt, all of that was useless. I felt powerless." Ethan spoke up. "Being afraid is normal, but walking away isn't the answer. The only thing you need to do is sit in that chair right there and be with her." William looked toward the empty chair at their table. For the first time, he stepped forward and sat down. William pulled the empty chair beside Grace and sat down. The soft scrape of the chair legs against the wooden floor echoed in the quiet of Harvest Moon Bakery, like an invisible milestone. For years, he had never truly sat beside his daughter, always at the head of the table, in the position of command, looking down. Now, they were side by side. Grace glanced at her father. "It's been a long time since you've sat next to me." William gave a small nod. Far too long. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the rain tapping against the window panes and the sweet scent of waffles drifting through the air. Ethan rested a hand on Chloe's shoulder to keep her still. He knew this moment didn't need a third voice to intrude. But Grace looked over at him as if to say, "You're part of this story too." "Dad," Grace began, "I don't want to have to choose between my family and the family you think I should have. Ethan and Chloe are my choice, and I'm not taking it back." William held her gaze, then turned to Ethan. "Do you truly love my daughter? Or is it just pity?" Ethan answered without hesitation, "I love Grace not because she's perfect, but because she's herself, and I care for her not because of the wheelchair, but because of what she's endured and how she's still standing her way. And Chloe, she loves Grace as part of us. We're not here to take anything. We're here to share and to give." Chloe looked up. "I gave her a cupcake, and I gave her my chair, too." The innocent remark made Grace laugh through her tears. "And that's the most precious gift," she said, taking Chloe's hand. William exhaled a long, heavy breath of someone who'd held too much inside. "When your mother died, I threw myself into work. It was the only thing I knew how to control. I thought if I built more, earned more, I could protect you better. But when you got hurt, none of that could help. I felt useless, and I hated that feeling. So I stayed away." Grace tightened her hands in her lap. "You don't need to fix me. I'm not broken. I'm just different. And if you'll sit down, I'll let you stay right here, beside me, the way Ethan and Chloe did." William turned to Ethan. "I was wrong about you. I looked at you and only saw a man with less than I have, less money, less power. I didn't see what you had more of: presence, patience, and the ability to love without fear of getting hurt." Ethan shook his head. "I'm afraid too. But I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's staying and holding the hand of the one you love, even when you're scared." Chloe hesitantly raised her hand. "So, can we be a family now?" The question made all three adults laugh a light, relieved sound, like they had just crossed a shaky bridge and knew they were safe on the other side. William looked back at his daughter. "I've missed too many years. I don't know if you'll give me the chance to make it up to you." Grace nodded, her voice hoarse but steady. "One day at a time. Dad, all you have to do is sit in the chair beside me. That's enough." Outside, the rain was easing. The streetlights glimmered on the wet pavement like sheets of gold. No one spoke for the next few minutes. They simply sat there, Grace, William, Ethan, and Chloe around a table where every chair was filled. As they rose to leave, William paused at the door. He turned back, glancing at the table once more. "Grace, yes, thank you for giving me a seat." Grace smiled. "Thank you for sitting down." Ethan held the door open for William and Chloe to step out first. Grace followed, her heart lighter, as if setting down a burden she'd carried for far too long. She had once thought the empty chair was only about loneliness, and now she understood it was also about willingness. The willingness to let someone fill the space, and the willingness to step into someone else's. On the way home, Chloe chattered about this very special meeting. William listened without interrupting, even asking questions. In the back, Grace looked into the rearview mirror and saw her father and Ethan exchange a few quiet words. They might not become best friends overnight, but at least they had begun. And tomorrow, when she returned to Harvest Moon Bakery, the chair beside her would no longer be empty. A year after that rainy evening at Harvest Moon Bakery, the shop's windows once again glowed with light, this time not from wet street lamps, but from hundreds of tiny strings of lights woven across the ceiling, threaded between white ribbons and fresh flowers. Today was Grace's 24th birthday, but it wasn't the only reason everyone had gathered. On the long table by the window, where one chair had always sat empty, now lay a pristine white tablecloth, bright with sunflowers. At the center, 2 special seats were reserved for the bride and groom. The once empty chair had become a wedding chair, draped in soft lace and tied with a pale yellow ribbon. William stood near the door, dressed in a deep blue suit, smiling as he greeted familiar guests, friends from town, Ethan's colleagues, a few of Grace's old friends. His face no longer carried the strain of a man controlling everything, but the calm of a proud father. Over the past year, he had stepped back from daily operations, handing over the reins to his management team. He attended Grace's therapy sessions, learning how to support his daughter without imposing. Many evenings, he visited Ethan's workshop, picking up a saw or smoothing wood, discovering the quiet joy of making something with his own hands. When the music began, William rested a hand gently on Grace's shoulder. "You look beautiful," he murmured. "Your mother would be so proud." Grace looked up, her eyes shining. "And you've been here all year. I'm proud of you, too." They walked together to the table, where Ethan was waiting, Chloe beside him in a little yellow dress, her hair adorned with tiny flowers, maid of honor and keeper of the promise from last year. The ceremony was simple, warm. The bakery's owner, who had witnessed their first meeting, began with, "A year ago, this table had an empty seat. Today, not only that seat, but every seat in this room is filled with love, with family, with choice." Ethan spoke his vows. "Grace, you've taught me that love doesn't look for someone perfect. It finds the one whose broken pieces fit with yours. I promise I will always see you not the wheelchair, not the limits, but you the person who saved me and Chloe from a life only half lived." Grace replied, her voice steady and warm. "Ethan, you and Chloe didn't just accept me as I am. You showed me that those limits don't define my worth. I promise to be the mother Chloe deserves, the wife you deserve to love, and every day I will choose us the way you chose me." When they kissed, Chloe shouted, "From now on, Miss Grace's chair will always have someone in it." Laughter and applause rippled through the room. The reception flowed right there in the bakery. Bluegrass music filled the air as guests danced between tables. Grace spun her wheelchair in circles among friends, and Chloe darted around like a beam of sunlight. William unexpectedly stepped up to the small stage, taking the microphone. "I used to think strength meant never letting anyone see you weak, and success meant never needing anyone. But my daughter and her new family have taught me that true strength is daring to be vulnerable, and true success is connection. Ethan, thank you for sitting beside her when I couldn't. Chloe, thank you for the cupcake and your brave heart. Grace, thank you for keeping a seat for me. Even when I came late, no one kept their eyes dry." As the night drew to a close, Grace wheeled outside for air. The sky was clear and glittering, a rare sight in Willow Creek. Ethan followed, carrying a slice of wedding cake. "No one should eat cake alone," he said, echoing the words from that first day. Grace smiled, pulling him close. "And I never will again." Through the bakery's window, she saw every seat occupied, no empty spaces, and inside her, that emptiness had been filled, too. Tonight, under Willow Creek's star-filled sky, Grace knew she had not only found love, but also found herself again, and a family that chose to stay. Every day, through ease and difficulty, somewhere out there, another space might be waiting to be filled just by your presence. And you, how long has it been since you've sat beside someone, truly listened, and stayed? If this story makes you think of someone, send it to them today. Who knows, this could be the moment that begins a whole new journey. And don't forget to subscribe to American Stories. So next week you'll have another reason to believe that sometimes just one warm seat can change an entire life.